The air over central Texas had been thick and oppressive for days, a suffocating blanket that seemed to press down on the rolling hill country. Then, on July 13, 2025, that oppressive heat broke in the most violent way imaginable. A supercharged storm system, moving with terrifying speed and power, stalled over the region, unleashing a deluge that would rewrite local geography in a matter of hours. What began as a summer storm quickly morphed into a historic, catastrophic flash flood, turning serene residential streets into raging, debris-choked rivers. Nowhere was the transformation more dramatic than in Lampasas County. Residents in the city of Lampasas and the nearby community of Skempner could only watch in disbelief as the Lampasas River, a typically placid waterway flowing at a gentle depth of less than 2 feet, became a monstrous, churning torrent. Fueled by runoff from the saturated hills, the river exploded, its waters cresting over an astonishing 30 feet in a span shorter than a workday. The speed of its rise was unprecedented, catching nearly everyone off guard. Familiar landscapes vanished in an instant. Roads and highways that had been lifelines for generations disappeared beneath violent, muddy currents. On Highway 183 northwest of Lampasas, the scene was one of apocalyptic chaos. Heavy trucks and passenger cars were tossed about and carried off the asphalt as if they were bath toys, their headlights flickering out as they were consumed by the brown water. For those witnessing the event, the scenes felt nightmarishly unreal. The terrifying sight of families clambering onto their rooftops, their forms silhouetted against the dark sky as they waved frantically for help, became the defining image of the disaster. In response, a desperate race against time began, with rescuers in shallow draft boats and helicopters converging on the hardest hit areas. An official flash flood emergency was declared by authorities, encompassing not only Lampasas but also the surrounding counties of Kerr, Sansaba, Schleicher, and Sutton. The alert, however, came too late for many. By the time the full severity of the situation became clear, the floodwaters had already breached front doors and shattered storefront windows. Families residing in low-lying areas, particularly vulnerable communities in mobile home parks, senior housing complexes, and RV camps, were given mere minutes to grab what they could before being ordered to flee. For many, even those few minutes were not enough. The surge was simply too fast, too powerful, and too unstoppable. The destruction was caused by more than just the water itself. It was a battering ram of debris, uprooted trees, shattered lumber, and personal belongings, propelled by powerful currents that tore through drywall and shattered windows. Furniture, family photographs, and lifetimes of memories were violently stripped from homes and scattered for miles across fields and downstream. The emergency response rapidly escalated into a massive, multi-agency mission. Elite teams like Texas Task Force 1 were deployed alongside Texas Parks and Wildlife game wardens and scores of volunteer firefighters from across the region, all converging on the disaster zone to prevent further loss of life. Throughout the long, dark night, dozens of high-stakes swiftwater rescues were performed. Rescue crews navigated the treacherous, unpredictable currents, their only illumination coming from the stark beams of headlights and floodlights reflecting off the terrifyingly high water. The operations were fraught with peril. In several documented cases, rescue swimmers pulled desperate residents from the windows of their cars only moments before the vehicles were completely submerged. High above, helicopter crews hovered over inundated homes, skillfully lowering rescue baskets to winch stranded families, one by one, from the precarious safety of their own rooftops. For the shell-shocked residents of Central Texas, this disaster carried a painful echo of a very recent tragedy. It had been only 9 days since the devastating floods of July 4th, which had claimed at least 132 lives and obliterated communities all along the Guadalupe River. The emotional and physical wounds from that event were still painfully raw. Now, as they faced another brutal test of survival, the trauma was compounded. Authorities were forced to make the agonizing decision to suspend the ongoing search operations for victims of the July 4th flood in Kerr County, a necessary move to protect rescue workers from the new, immediate danger. meteorological data behind the disaster was staggering. The relentless storm had dumped between 6 and 12 inches of rain across different parts of the hill country, with the most intense bands stalling directly over Lampasas and its neighboring counties. Meticulous first responders, veterans of countless emergencies, described the conditions as some of the most dangerous and unpredictable they had ever encountered, citing the sheer velocity of the rising water. Amid the chaos, mandatory evacuation orders were broadcast across the affected counties. However, some residents, underestimating the threat or clinging to a desperate hope that the waters would recede, initially refused to leave. By the time they recognized their fatal miscalculation, their escape routes were already impassable. Emergency officials relentlessly repeated the single most important rule of flash floods: do not drive through flooded roads. As little as 6 inches of fast, moving water possesses enough force to knock a person off their feet, while 2 feet can sweep away most vehicles, including SUVs and trucks. Yet time and again, people underestimated the flood's power and found themselves trapped. As the cleanup begins, the full, devastating scale of the damage is still coming into focus. Experts warn that these extreme rainfall events are likely to become more frequent as global weather patterns shift. For the residents of Lampasas, the disaster has served as a brutal lesson in the absolute necessity of preparedness. An emergency kit is no longer a suggestion, it is essential. In the days to come, families will return to homes filled with toxic mud and the pervasive growth of mold. The long process of filing insurance claims and finding temporary housing will begin. The emotional recovery, for a community battered by 2 major disasters in as many weeks, will take even longer. But amid the devastation, a powerful sense of solidarity persists. The sight of neighbors helping neighbors and rescue teams working to the point of exhaustion has become the counter-narrative to the destruction. This is the story unfolding in Texas today, one of immense loss, incredible bravery, and a community being forged and strengthened under the most unimaginable pressure.